Let's take a closer look at how we can use observables with Knockout. And to do that, let's use a really quick and easy tool called Plunker. Just go to this URL here, and then you'll get to this page, and you can create a free account, which is what I've done here. And then once you do that, you can launch the editor. And what this site allows you to do is it lets you create HTML, JavaScript, and CSS so you can live preview different things. And then you can save those here online, or you can download the files when you're done. So what I've done here is created a simple HTML file, and we can type in our own HTML. And I want to create a little sample here where we can show a couple of observables and bind them up to the screen, and we'll use an observable array too. To start out, let's go ahead and add in the Bootstrap CSS files. We can type these in up here to get Bootstrap. Just give us a little bit of style to our page. And we're going to take this script file here, we're going to move it from line 8 down to the end of the body. And that's a tip I like to do because it should have all your script files loading after the HTML so they don't hold up the HTML from rendering. Now script.js is over here. Plunker gives me this blank JavaScript file so I can enter my code. We're not going to do that yet though. First let's fill out our HTML. Instead of hello Plunker, let's call this hello Knockout. And as you can see, it showed a plunk created in the bottom right hand corner. If you want to see what it looks like, we can click on the eyeball. It's called a live preview in the upper right hand corner. When I click on that, it's actually going to run my HTML, JavaScript, and CSS and show it over on the right hand side. Nothing to see yet, so for now I'm going to close the live preview. Next, let's go ahead and make sure we've got all of our JavaScript files in place that we want to use. Now I want to pull in jQuery and I want to pull in Knockout. So I'm going to pull in those from CDNs. First I'm going to get jQuery 191 and Knockout 2.2.1. And then I'd also like to make sure that I've got a little HTML that I can type in so I can actually have something to bind to. So in here, let's go ahead and assume we've got a list of people, and then we're going to show that list of people on the page. First, let's show a count of how many records we have for our list. Maybe I have a div up here, and in that div, I want a data bind to it, and that's where I'm going to put in my list of people. So I'm going to assume I've got this array called people, and I want to put in the length for the people. Now, when I do that, the data bind, I have to tell it what I'm binding to, and the binding is going to be text. And because I'm using Bootstrap, I can just assign it a class here, and I'm going to make that class be label. Now if I want to see what's happened so far, the plunk has been created, and over here we're going to see records, and there's nothing to be bound to yet because we have no people object, so we're just seeing records show up. Now let's pull this off to the side so we can see it as we go through. So now we have our total records. Let's go ahead and create a UL. This is going to be our unordered list, and then we're going to data bind to it. And this time we're going to data bind with the for each with the people. So we're going to loop through all the people that we have, and then for each one of those we're going to create an LI. And inside of here, we're going to assume that the people have a name. And we'll data bind to the text property, the text binding, for that span. So now again, we can see the plunk's been created. Over here we get the records. It shows that an LI exists, but again, we don't have anything yet to bind to. So let's go ahead now and create a little bit of CSS. I don't want the bolts to show up. So for that style, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And here I'm just going to type in for a UL. And then for that UL, I'm going to say list style is none. And then I'll also give a little bit of margin here just so we can put things back on the page a little closer. And there we go. So now we got rid of the little bullet that was there. Next, we want to go create our JavaScript. So we're going to go over to the script.js, and we're going to type in a little view model so we can have a little bit of knockout going on. So now we're going to say, okay, when the document is ready, let's go ahead and run this function using jQuery. Remember, we pulled in jQuery earlier, so we're good to go. And then inside of that function, we want to create this person constructor. So I want to create a person object so I can add it to my people array. And the person is going to accept in the name, and we'll go ahead and just set the name to be an observable. So here we're going to type in this name, and we're going to set the equal to name. Now notice that this constructor accepts in the property for name, and then it creates a property called name, and it makes that equal to an observable, which has a value of whatever we passed in. Now let's create our view model. And the view model is going to be a function. It's going to be an IFI. It's going to immediately execute. And an IFI is an immediately invoked function execution. That basically just means that everything that we do inside of this function is going to execute right away and then be returned. And the structure of that is going to be that at the end, we're going to return back this object. Inside the object, we want to have this people. And that's going to be the people that we data bound to over in the HTML. So this people property here is going to be returned. And that's going to be bound right here in our text and in our for each. Let's go back to our JavaScript, and now we want to create a person object. We'll just call this P1. We'll use a constructor here. to say, okay, set this person, and we'll go ahead and call the person Haley. And we'll create a second person too. And we'll call this one Ella. Now we have to create our array internally. So here's our people array. And now what we could do is just make this equal to a regular array. So we could set it equal to an array and then pass in P1 and P2. Or we can make this observable, so when we add and remove them, that they could be bound to the screen. So for now, let's go ahead and make it observable. And to do that, I just make it an observable array property. I pass in the array that contains P1 and P2, and then I'm going to return out people. So this side of people here matches to the variable. So I called this people foo. Then I would have to match up here to people foo. So what's happening is on the left-hand side of the return, that's the property that's going to be exposed to the HTML, so I can data bind to it. On the right-hand side, that's the property name internally that I point to the variable. And this is the module pattern, or the revealing module pattern, if you will. Because what's happening is I've created a module here from line 9 down to 16. All that stuff is going to be wrapped inside and encapsulated it so that those properties are not exposed externally. The only thing that's exposed externally is the return object, which contains a property called people, which points to the observable array, people foo. So let's get rid of foo, because that's kind of weird. And then finally, once we get our view model in place, we have to make sure we apply the bindings so our knockout can work. And we're going to say apply the bindings for this view model to the HTML. And notice on the right-hand side with our preview, we now have Haley and Ella showing up. And as an experiment, we could see that we could get rid of the observable up here for the name because we're not actually changing the name yet. And notice the right-hand side still renders properly. Now, we can't get rid of this observable yet. We could, but if we do this right now, we're actually not going to see anything on the right-hand side. Notice over here there's nothing. And the reason for that is not that this is invalid. It's that back in the HTML, we said bind to people parens length. If I get rid of those parens now, because it's just a normal array, it's no longer an observable array, now I can just say people length, and it works fine. But let's put those parens back in. And now we come back over here, and we can create the observable array, and our data should show up again. We're also going to make this guy be an observable too, because we're going to use that in the next section.